I am here as ever with Laure Jackson, and very oddly, Happy New Year.
I know. It's like how many days into January, but I'm still saying Happy New Year. But it's so lovely to see people that we haven't since the turn of the year. Yeah, lovely
I
to see.
I had this chat with somebody. When does Happy New Year become the thing you don't say? Can you say
Yeah.
Happy New Year at the end of the year if you've not seen that person? And my thought is, if you haven't yet seen them and there's at least one day of the year left, then you can say Happy New Year. That's my Andy B new rule as of today.
Okay.
But you can't say it on the 31st of December. That's the rule. Has to be a caveat. Hello, Anne. How are you?
I am I am really well. I'm just feel as though I'm very different coming into 20 or moving through 2025. And even though it has been a few days, only a few days, there are definitely differences in me, which is really strange, but a lovely thing, and I think all for good. But I can tell that there's a definite shift coming into this year, coming off the back of 2024.
I felt like I came into it sideways, handbrake turning through a hedge, but a different response.
Yes, I know it's been quite some experience. Yes.
Right. Sensory health. So I was checking about this the other day, and I was about to say before we went on, and I completely forgot. But we've been doing this for a while, and I'm just checking how many we've done because I love the idea that you and I have got together and we're talking about sensory health and we're saying, well, what is sensory health? How does it work? What part has it got into our life? Well, this is number 50.
Yay. I knew it's either 49, 50. I knew around that mark, and it's just like, yes, that is a
I'm
milestone.
It is. I was right because I thought I'm sure it's important. Yes, this is our 50th chat on sensory health. We got no intentions of stopping. We're absolutely loving this because, I mean, what have you got any like highlights from all the chats we've had? Have you got some you think I didn't think we'd be chatting about that on air, but you're really happy that we did? So, have you got any kind of memorable sensory health conversations that we've had?
I just found it phenomenal that anything that I have come with, because I come still with a clinical background, because that's where most of my experiences come from. I have that mindset, but I'm trying to bring it into everyday life because it ought to be in everyday life. So we need to take it out of the clinics, out of the hospitals, out of the county councils, out of everything else, and put it into everybody's everyday life at home, at school, in the workplace. And you have just been such a beautiful and a brilliant presenter to do that because you have seen things and you've automatically associated it with an everyday life situation, whether it be from your family, your own experience of somebody that you've been chatting to, because you do chat to lots of people, which is your job, and it's an absolute blessing. So that combination of drawing it into the here and now, into everybody's life, that's been most precious. There's nothing in particular that strikes me apart from all your driving. We definitely in the early years came back to the cars and the trucks and everything else, and it was just like it was such a good thing to say this is for everyday life, for everybody in everyday life.
Thank you. I know we've looked at brain surgery and how that affects somebody 30 years later. We looked at truck design, how we could, between us, we could design the perfect cab for the haulage industry. I remember that one distinctly. It was brilliant fun. And there's been some great conversations because the thing is about sensory health, we kind of have this very rudimentary understanding of the, I'm holding a pen. Great. And that's it. That's where it stops. But what we don't really consider is, but I'm holding the pen. I can feel the plastic on the one hand. I've got a metal thing that I can touch on one part of my hand. I can feel the rubber in another. And actually, that's all to do with a small piece of sensory health. And we don't consider the implications of that beyond perhaps, well, like my wife can't use anything other than silver or gold earrings because she's allergic to the metal. Okay, so we have a conscious consideration that perhaps metal is harder and it can have a negative response. That's my own knowledge of it. But then the sensory health means I can feel the ridges on the grip as well as the soft squishy bit next to it. And that's all because my sensory health is working well. But where we chat to people like you is there are lots of people who can't feel those ridges or feel those ridges and it hurts like mad when they squeeze them, or they can't differentiate between the plastic and the rubber. Well, that's not a big deal. Well, it's a massive deal if you're picking up something and you can't decide whether it's hot or cold, burning or freezing. And that's where the sensory health conversation is such an important one, because I'm just talking about a pen, but I could probably talk about sensory health to a teeny degree at this point, just around holding a pen.
Yeah. And that is where I love that beauty of absolutely everything. It is the very basis on which the rest of our function happens. If you can't feel, if you can't sense anything, you're lost in this world. You're lost in space, because even our vestibular system tells us which way up we are. It's like we could be floating in outer space if our senses, if we are not connected to our senses. And it's a very disorientating, it's a very anxiety provoking, it's a very it hits your self-esteem. It just hits so many things on a conscious level without people realizing that it is a subconscious thing. All our senses are processing without us being consciously aware of it until we need to be. And when it's not processing on a subconscious level, then that's when we have the problems. And that's when we need to bring it into our conscious awareness to say, right, we need to pay attention to this because it's not working. So how can we consciously start these things processing better so that you can go back to living automatically, like going back to the car, like driving a car? You have to learn every single way of moving your feet and your arms and where you look, and you look in the wing mirror and you look at, you have to teach yourself how to do things until it becomes automatic. So that's what we do in sensory processing and integration. It's when things aren't happening. If you can't drive a car, if it's not working, you go back and analyze and break it down to find where is the breakdown? Where is the breakdown in the sensory processing, so that we can get you moving and functioning automatically with freedom and peace and hope and calm and contentedness and confidence and all of those things that bring us pleasure.
And that being rooted bit is so critical to you and I, because not only are we talking about sensory health, we're talking about how I can hold a pen, I can use a pen, my eye is watching where the pen's going. I can not look at the pen and I can still write, probably a bit more messily, because there's lots of sensory systems working together that enable me to hold a pen, to write a pen, to have the right firmness on it, so I'm not breaking my fingers, which is potentially possible, or so loose that it's slipping out. So there's all that integration going on. But for you, like I, of course, because we're Christians as well, it's even more exciting to see how God has designed us to function on our own, autonomously holding a pen, writing a letter, as well as integrating into other people's lives. Because as well as the sensory health specialism, if I can put it that way, you're also an occupational therapist. So you're not just helping people with sensory health, it's helping people with sensory health for a purpose.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's so brilliantly put. Can I take that?
I do try.
Yeah, that was brilliant. And do you know, one of the things, like this year, I've had two people talking, just because you keep like just been mentioning the pen thing. The biggest thing for them has been that their sons, there were two boys, they couldn't touch the paper. They were just they couldn't handwrite, not because of the pen, not because of all those issues, but literally because of the feel of the paper on their skin. And that's what we had to deal with first before we could even get to the pen. And it was just the sense of, the parents coming back and saying, well, they're now colouring and it's not an issue. And yet for years, this has been an issue for them doing their work and doing their schoolwork. So it's a most bizarre thing when if you've not seen it. If you are seeing it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. When you haven't seen these things, it's hard to get your head around sometimes. But it does make you, hopefully, we're just opening the eyes and the ears and the hearts of people to see things that maybe they've not even paid attention to before. Because, as I say, most of the work that we do from a sensory processing issue isn't within our conscious awareness until we've brought somebody's attention to something.
Can I make a suggestion what this might be like? And you might say, no, you're wrong, which is quite possible. But I'm thinking about going back 100, 150 years in education where you wrote with your right hand. And if you didn't write with your right hand, then you were wrong. You must write with your right hand because, of course, predominantly people were and still are right-handed naturally. Yeah. But, of course, in education, we want everyone to conform to a certain way of doing things, which makes sense. So you're going to come into a room and sit here. But actually that conformity went too far because you need to write with your right hand. And if you can't, well, what's wrong with you? You need to use your right hand. Well, we understand now today that's an insane idea, because if you're not right-handed, unless you've lost your right hand, you're not going to suddenly start writing with your left hand. You're just not going to do it, because naturally our brain is going to be stronger on one side than the other. So that makes sense to us in many simple ways. Would you say that the change between you must write with your right hand regardless, oh, actually you're better with your left, is that change in education, is that similar to And what we've seen with Sensory Health, where instead of saying, right, you're a stupid child, you cannot write on paper, what's wrong with you? Well, nothing. They just can't touch paper because there's a sensory issue. Is it that kind of a change that you're beginning to see in the world of sensory health?
Yeah. Yeah, I think
Wow.
that's a really, really good analogy. And also the fact, just the joy at the moment, and I have permission to talk about it, that our government is now funding the sensory super system to go into every single state school and every parent on the island, whether they're schooled, whether they're homeschooled, to be able, if they are struggling in any of these issues, in any of these areas, that they can go in and they can do their own assessment with the things that we have online, the online resources that we have for them, and to come and talk to me, once a week to have that conversation about what is going on and what we can do to help. And that is a phenomenal thing. And I'm just so thankful that that has gone out. And I do pray that it will go, it will spread. That it isn't just something for Jersey, but that it will spread.
I mean, that's cool. Just in itself, that's really good that people have actually got somewhere to go instead of,
Mm.
banging your head metaphorically against a brick wall thinking, what is wrong with my child? What is wrong with me? Where have I failed? Actually, there's somebody like you can come along and say, you haven't failed. There's nothing wrong with your child in this context, but they're struggling with this thing over here that seems completely unrelated and unconnected. But actually, if we can deal with it, it'll be a cascade of help, which is the whole point of what we're talking about every single week.
And then also finding out if it's not sensory, which is so because if it is sensory, because we know it's so foundational, so the building blocks of so many skills, if we do a proper assessment between us and we find out that it's not, well, then it's a brilliant thing to be able to say, oh, great, it is not that. I now need to focus on something else. It's because of the way that their brain works as far as like seeing autistic side of things, that they're incredibly linear and they need certain things presented in a certain way. And it's just great to be able to screen that out and say, well, actually, it's not that, because if it is that, I can help you and like we can change things. But if it's not, great to know that it's not that, and therefore we'll focus on something else.
I want to come on to a few other things, but you've talked about the sensory system that you've got. Just, I know we've touched on it many times, and sometimes perhaps we reference it without enough description for people. But what is the sensory system? How did that come to be, and what's the purpose of what it is?
The sensory super system that I've
Yeah.
created. Yeah. So that is something I was my husband was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis and I was home educating my three boys as well as working as a private practitioner. So I could not, when we moved back to Jersey, I could not leave the island. I couldn't leave my family in that way. But there was so much knowledge that I'd gained because I loved the subject and I'd trained and done further training. Um, and when people were asking me back in the UK to come back over and train, I couldn't. So there's a sense of why can't I need to create something somehow. And this was like nearly 10 years ago now, before Zoom, before everybody was used to pre-COVID, basically, when life was really quite different. And I was putting together a resource to be able to help people. And it has just grown and grown and grown as a way, not just to train people in sensory processing issues, but to help them do the assessment, because that was the key bit that was missing. There's so much stuff that's available, especially nowadays on all social media, that you can get general things, but you can't get anything that is specific, that is individualized, that is personalized to your child, to your adult, to somebody that you're working with. And it's that personal, we're just so uniquely made, fearfully, wonderfully, uniquely, beautifully made. What is it about a single person that we need to address? Because God's a God of order. We are so unique and made especially so for that. So that's why the system has grown, not just as a training resource, but as a way of finding out who each person is from a sensory perspective, and then how we can actually meet those needs to help them function, thrive, flourish, do the things in life that they want to do.
That's one of the dangers in this. I've just been reading a book and it talks about the difference of, the early 90s to now, 30-year gap, just the difference of how we access data, how much data there is, how we can easily access data, which is unhelpful, by which I just mean it's not relevant to you. We can almost become like internet doctors, you know. Oh, I've got this condition. I've Googled it, Mr. GP, therefore I know what's wrong with it. No, you're wrong. Because this person has probably got 12 or 14 years of medical experience, and they're going to be saying, no, just no, that's not the question. Chatting to someone just yesterday, she was a GP for quite a long time. She now works for the CMF. But she was just talking about medicine and how many different types of medicine there are. And we were looking at how they can interact with one another and how that can kind of skew a diagnosis. We have so much information, but unless we have the knowledge and the skill base within which to hold that information in order to apply it, what we've got is a puddle of mess that doesn't make a lot of sense as soon as we blow on the water because the ripples change the look and now it's not what we thought it was.
Yeah.
And I guess that's why we need much. I mean, God has made us in his image. We're not all the same. We can't conform identically. Therefore, we do need somebody who can look outside of us and say, well, that's great, but let's consider this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really love the fact that each time as I grow and learn, and there's other people come into the system, that actually I will focus on the actual pure sensory aspects of it, and I need to stay in my lane, as it were, stay in the area of expertise, but then be really happy to connect and think, well, actually, because I know obviously that not everything is sensory, so it's just like, can we provide a support in this way? If there is more of a mental health side of things that we need, who else can actually be part of the organization, be part of something, be part of what we're doing to be able to support people, or pass them on to other organizations that will be able to speak into that area that has come out since we've assessed and realized that it's partly sensory or that it's not a sensory issue.
Right, let's. 'Cause I'm just sort of reviewing bits and pieces. One of the other things that you've recently launched is your centre on Jersey, because we're talking about where you are. You live on the island of Jersey, which always throws me because I tried to send a letter the other day to Jersey, thinking it's got to go overseas, and even the person in the post office said, "Oh yes, it's international." Oh, hang on a minute, and there was this moment of confusion of, "Oh, hang on, it's got a postcode, so that's." No, we can just put it. It was funny conversation with this person in the post office and me both saying, "Well, it's an international letter." Actually, no, it's not, because it's got. We're talking about you on Jersey, so the centre on Jersey. Just talk to us about that.
So that is a space where, yes, I do some treatments there as an occupational therapist to do an assessment, come alongside families. But the heart of it, because I love family and trying to work out how to equip and empower families, is that for most of the time during the week and the weekends, it's there for families to come and to use and to create memories, to be their own therapist, all attachment issues, or anyone who's adopted or just wants to create a stronger bond. That is what the centre is there for, because you come and you play together. You spend that time together, regardless of whether you're a child or a young person, or even some adults can come and use it, because we all need to be able to swing. We all need to rock. People love ball pits. Offices are changing, and that there's loads of different activities that people of all ages can come and use it. But it's a space to feel good, because when we are integrating our senses well, then that is when we do feel good and we have fun.
Which is so important, because if we are very much not centered in the world, in our place in the world, I don't mean we know our place. That's not what we're talking about here. But we know where we are within the world. When we have that kind of level of security, all of a sudden it makes lots of things easier. Sometimes just taking time out can be all we need, or just having time that's relevant. Because like I say, you said this in the past, some of the equipment you've got for your job, people can make use of, which perhaps they ordinarily wouldn't be able to afford, or even just have the room for. It's not even necessarily a financial constraint. It can be a geographical constraint or a space constraint. If you're in a smaller house and you've got a child that just wants to do more than crawl 2 meters forwards and back, well, maybe there's something else we can do, and you haven't got room to stop. You're renting, you can't put things off the ceiling because your landlord wouldn't like that. At which point, what you're offering is such a unique gift for people.
And we're trying to make it small, because there's loads of places that offer the big. You've got the big play areas, you've got the jump, you've got the bouncing places, you've got the soft play, but they're big and they are noisy, and you can't control anything about it apart from the fact that it's you and you're in there and you're using everything that's normally pretty static. because it has to be safe because it's dealing with you can't have so it's what I have we have puzzles, we have jigsaws, we have different spots, we have different types of balls that they can throw. You can't have that kind of thing in a bigger environment, so that the families, so it is just it's a one room space so that it is secure, so that people can't run out all over the place. It is quiet. They can totally be in control of how many people are in that environment or not. They can switch the lights off if they want. They can play the music that they want to play. It's just a space to honor that people make it work for them. So it's not just that emotional connection. It's not just the sensory connection. It's not just all the bouncing and the crashing and the swinging, but that there's quiet times. It's just a private, personal, beautiful space just to enjoy.
Cool. Okay, so you said that you're coming into 25 different. Mine was more like handbrake turning backwards through a hedge. But what's coming up for you in 2025 in Sante? Which
Yeah.
is Sante is your company, your work.
Yeah, that's kind of like the overall branch because I'm someone who has had lots of different branches. So we've got the sensory super system, and I do the work with governments. I work with adoption support agencies in the UK and further afield. I work globally with people and parents who connect with me. We've got the centre on the island for folk, and then there's also the Sensory Healthy Church programme, which is reaching out again globally. This isn't church isn't a Jersey thing. Church isn't a UK thing. Church is what God has instituted and wants us to be part of, to be changed into who Jesus wants us to be so that we can ultimately glorify him. Man's chief end. It's a beautiful thing, isn't it? To glorify God and enjoy him forever. So it's how our lives need to glorify him, need to reflect everything back to him. And it's like so much of that happens when church happens. We are changed when we come together. And it's about how we can incorporate people into corporate worship and in the life of the church, regardless of their age, regardless of their diagnosis, any disability, any creed, any color, anything. God's church is for humanity, full stop. And like it's not there yet. The bride that he wants just isn't. There's a bit of work to be done, shall we say? And it's like how can we do that? So what the Sensory Healthy Church is just one aspect of bringing this as an offering to the church community as leaders and as members, because everybody has their part to play in that diversity and that inclusion and that bringing people together just to be in worship.
So you mentioned something about just off air that there was a Zoom coming up. Just talk to us about that.
Yeah. So if anybody goes to the sensoryhealthychurch.com or Laure Jackson /church, there is it's a free program. It's 3 hours of training. So the first hour was what God was doing in me, and then through the team that came together to put this together, research that we did about the needs that people were struggling with. And then the middle hour is about the solutions that me as an OT and a sensory specialist have been able to present. So that there's pictures and there's videos, there's things that people can look at. And then the final hour is about how else, those other things that can support the sensory needs, but it may be that we need to use language differently. So they're not directly sensory things, but there are things about how you can put this into practice well. So that's where it's kind of split into the 3 hours. So it's kind of like for folks to just go in and have a look. They're broken down into 5 or 10 minute videos, that they're not long things. So it's bite size for people. But on the 5th of February and on the 12th of February, there are free Zooms so that anybody who's got the Sensory Healthy Church can come and just chat and say, look, I'm really interested, but I don't know how to make it work. Or can you explain a bit more about this? Because I kind of get it, but I'm not sure. So it's kind of get the program, have a look at it, and then we can actually get some Zooms together and really, really talk about how to implement this to start making changes, because there's a lot of people who are not going to church because it's just too tricky. It's too stressful.
But a point I like to frequently make is this is not for children. This is for everybody. So we're not talking about making it a child sensory healthy, happy place. We're talking about making it a sensory good place for everybody from 0 to 80 and beyond,
Mhm.
including in the womb. We've talked about pregnancy and sensory health. We've talked about older folk, dementia, Alzheimer's. How can sensory health help them and help families help them, and everybody in between? So I always like to make this distinction when I can, because otherwise we think, well, sensory health is about little children with autism. Yes, no, it's much, much wider than that, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Thank you. I really appreciate you doing that.
I think it's important because I think otherwise we end up spending a lot of time focusing on we have to make children happy in churches because we've got good families and all the rest of it. But you know what? The church isn't made up of families. It is a family, and in the family there are families, and there are people who are single. There are people who are widowed. There are older folk who are struggling with mental health issues and physical health issues, and people who can't even get to church anymore because they're stuck at home, who are in their tens and in their fifties and in their nineties. So the church is such a wide range of people and needs, and a bit like the everyone's going to write right-handed because it's the right way of doing it issue in education a long time, where actually, do you know what, everybody doesn't write with a right hand. I do. One of my sons doesn't. And short of a major traumatic incident, you're not going to learn to write with another hand. It just, you're not going to do that because
No.
it's really, really hard. And actually, a lot of what you're doing and what you offer people, and we've done it when we were in children's ministry a little bit without any real knowledge, a lot of it's actually very easy and very simple.
Mm.
Nobody really notices anything, and yet all of a sudden you've just, I don't think, how would I put it? I don't think it's about including more people. I think it's about not excluding people. And I think that's probably quite a good way of looking at it. I don't think we
Mm.
need help including. I think we need help to stop excluding people from
That's
accessing
brilliant.
church.
I think that's brilliant. That's a really good way of saying
I just came up with it.
it.
You can knit that one as well. But I think that's the point, isn't it? Because otherwise, you can think, oh, well, we're going to have screens everywhere and everything's going to get topsy turvy and there'll be no core, no focus, no heart. No, 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 no. A lot of what we need to do for helping church be accessible by people, it's actually very simple. And most people probably wouldn't even notice it was going on to stop excluding a whole bunch of people. I'll tell you why I say it that way. It's because I remember reading during COVID a lady in a wheelchair who said, you know, I'm really happy about COVID for one reason. It's terrible, but I'm really happy that all the people in my church now know what it's like to be excluded from going to church. This is
Right.
someone in a wheelchair who could not get to church, felt part of the community, but physically never attended. They couldn't. Maybe once a year, if their body was cooperating in time for them to get to the taxi to get to church. Said, now you know what it's like for the rest of us
Mm.
who are unable to get to church, which is why I tend to think of it as let's stop trying to include people and let's start stopping excluding people. Not great English, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. And I was thinking yesterday, what I was so appreciated about COVID, and I thought, have we missed something here? Everything went down to the household, and we've got that verse. But as for me, my household, we will serve the Lord. And it's like everything we were doing with households, you could do this. Yes, you had to bubble. There was a sense of what was wrong about it was that you couldn't actually join several households together because that was just too many. But you could still have the importance of the household was seen. And it's like we've come out of COVID and we're now splitting up the household. And it's like everybody, someone goes here and someone goes there and someone we've lost, we are losing. I still think we've lost the sense of the power of the importance of the household in discipleship, in ministry, in outreach, in all kinds of things. And that's what I was thinking yesterday. Yeah.
In life, generally, the family that functions well in a community of families that are functioning well brings a stronger family. We know this sociologically. It's not even debating or conversing about it. It is stronger families make better communities. It's just the way it is. And a stronger church family is that one that doesn't embrace one little teeny tiny group, but actually says, all are welcome. Nobody should be excluded from a church, And I think if we went to church with the mindset of how do we stop excluding people, I
Mm.
think church would actually do a lot better. It sounds like a negative, but I actually don't think it is. I think it's the focus of where we should be.
Yeah, and I'm trying to work out how can I say these things in a way that is not critical, that doesn't criticize, because I don't
Yeah.
think criticism does us any good at all.
No.
It's not helpful and people feel discouraged. And it's just like, how can I say words of truth without discouraging people? I'm always trying to put a positive, or there's a solution, and there's this, that. But at the end of the day, I've also come to realize in 2025, I'm just going to have to say certain things and know within my own heart that I'm not saying it to discourage anybody, but things need to be said and that I'm trying to help. If they interpret it the way that they do, well, then I'm sorry, but so be it. I have to stand and I have to stand firm. I was thinking Jesus didn't come to be liked. He came
Nope.
with a mission. He loved people so much, but his mission was not to be liked. And I thought, I have to take something from that. What is it that you need? I need to see to live out the mission without, I'm not going to put people's noses up for the sake of it. I really don't like that. That's not me. But to make sure that the message doesn't get lost in just trying to do things too gently and too sensitively, and yeah, just get a bit more boldness. So my prayer is that I don't mess up in my boldness that is really is really coming forth in 2025.
Gentle boldness.
Mm,
I was thinking about the truth will set you free, which is a really powerful bit of scripture.
right.
And we can be offensive for the sake of being offensive. And that's wrong every single time. I'm also thinking you can be right doing the wrong thing. You can say it with the right attitude, but if you say it the wrong way, you're still just as wrong as not saying the right thing. And I think just being clear and being wise. But actually, if we do have knowledge and we don't share it, that's,
Mm,
we need to be honest and truthful. Shine a light on the truth, was my friend Johnny would always say. Just shine a light on the truth, Andy. It's
mm,
such a wonderful way of considering how we do what we do, rather than criticizing somebody. Like you say, criticize. There is constructive criticism is another way of saying criticizing with a smile. It's not. There is no such thing. There is building somebody up and trying to encourage and help and shape. Yes, but constructive criticism, it's just, for me, it's a misnomer. It's a way of being able to be cruel with a nice smile. And well, it's constructive criticism, so you can't, you just have to
Oh,
take it.
that's an interesting one because I've always said like I'm up for yeah, but okay, I shall think on that one too.
Criticism is criticism. You're either criticizing, you're either building someone up or tearing them down.
Mm,
With our presenters, we always do one negative, two positives. Where's something
right.
you could do well, better, and what two things did you do well? And people say, we like this because there's always room for improvement. I'm always, okay, I run the station, but I'm still going to my operations manager and saying, was that okay? And he'll suggest better ways of doing it, because we're either going to be improving or we've made it and we've failed. So,
Mhm,
I want to keep improving and getting better, which means we need somebody to whom we can make ourselves accountable and say, can you tell me, how was that? Was that okay? And
mhm,
that goes the same for me. I like to ask people, what did you think? Because
mhm.
I'm a sensitive little soul and I like to know that I'm doing a good job. And if I'm not sure, I want to get that thing. But I don't want to say to somebody, can you criticize me, please? Because
No.
why would you say that?
Mm.
I completely agree. That's definitely a tangent. Right, Anne, thank you. I've loved these 50 sessions. Yay. Here's for another 50. Yeah, if you've got any questions for Anne about sensory health in your church, in your office, if you're running a festival thinking, how can we help people who've got issues with noise, which is the converse, but we want the family here. Anne is your lady. You need to talk to Anne. She'll help you. Go to annelaurejackson.com, and everything you want and more is on there. And we'll link to it from this video later when it gets on YouTube as well. So, Anne, that was the right website, wasn't it?
I was
Anne
going to
Law
say, it's
Jackson.
not
No,
yorepure247.com/ALJ.
well, there's that one as well. But I was trying, because you mentioned Anne Law Jackson earlier, so I thought let's just stick with the one. It's easier. AnneLawJackson.com. Yeah, go there and you'll find everything you need. Thank you,
Brilliant.
Anne. I'll be less confused next week, maybe. Who knows?